So I got that muted,
Mm, okay.
and then we'll go ahead and give it a moment and get started. We're live on
Sounds good.
YouTube though, but um,
Okay.
okay. Well, hello everybody. This is Dan Jones from Jones Business Management and Growth Consultants, and welcome to our live weekly webinar. It's every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and this week we are going to be speaking with Miss Rachel Lee about obtaining government contracts for landscaping business at the federal, state, and local levels. So I would like to introduce Rachel, and thank you very much, Rachel, for agreeing to meet with me today and talk with my audience. And why don't you tell us all a little bit about your experience and how you got into this branch of consulting.
Yes, thank you so much, Daniel, for allowing me to come on your show and talk about a little bit about government contracts. I was in the US Army, and in the Army, I did a lot of acquisitions, which are the person on the other side that's taking in those contracts, going through them, going through the proposals, checking them, actually sourcing and finding the right prime contractors in order to do the work. So I've been doing this for about 20 years, a little over 20 years now. And I just love the field. Now I'm on the outside. I was in the Army for 8 years and I went into Dynacorp, KBR. I was the government contracting team. So my largest contract was $4.5 billion. I actually, we already received more than $20 billion in different government contracts. Uh, from landscaping to construction to just about everything, logistics, name it, I've done it.
Right.
So that's basically on government contracts. And there is a lot of landscaping, especially now. There's more and more landscaping coming out throughout the states, state of Texas, Colorado. So you will see more and more coming out as we continue. Yes.
So yeah, you were in the Army. I'm an Army vet.
Yep.
I was in, probably far further back than you were. What is the it looking like for the landscaping on an Army base? Because I can tell you when I was in, the landscapers were the privates. So
Yeah. So now, thank God, if you're in the military, you're no longer doing landscaping. It's actually subbed out to a lot of prime contractors. Usually, a base will subcontract certain areas out to prime subcontractors, and other times, just depending on how large the base is, um, or how small it is, you might be able to take on the entire base. So it all depends on the size. Yes.
okay. So what is and I'm sure we'll get into this a little further, but can you just give a brief description of what a prime subcontractor is?
Sure. So the prime is the first line subcontractor. So it's the first contractor
Okay.
on the that receives the government contract. So when you receive an award, it will be the name, let's say ABC Company, that will be the actual prime contractor on the award. The subcontractor are contractors that may come underneath the
Okay.
prime. Yes, so it's the awardee. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense.
Yes.
So, let's try and understand the process, and we can dive into that a little bit. And I guess we'll start with the elephant in the room. So, with the current political climate, how is this going to affect uh, does this affect, or do you see it affecting contractors on the federal level? And then maybe because a lot of grants are given it to the state and local level from the federal government, do you see it trickling down and possibly having an effect on those as well?
A great question. Well, definitely, it is going to affect the federal and the local governments, so the state governments. The way it's going to affect it is not, you will not see the government decide no longer to procure. So contracts are not going away. They're here to stay. Okay. That's the line of how the government does their purchases. What you're going to see is where the money goes. That's going to be the number one factor of how it's going to affect contracting as a whole. So if most contracts were going, let's say, for example, to homeless care. Depending on the administration that's in there, it it might shift. A percentage of it might be reduced, and then it goes towards something else. So
Okay.
that's basically what you will see: money moving from one agency to another.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So then why don't you briefly walk us through the basic steps involved in obtaining a government contract for landscaping services?
Sure. So, number one thing, if you're going to do government contracts on a federal level, registration. So, sam.gov is the place that you go to do your registration in order to receive a cage code. And that cage code is what you use in order to get awarded. So, if you're not in sam.gov, you cannot do government contracts. Now, state level, each state has their own registration, and so you can register with the state just depending on the contract that's being awarded. You might need to as well register with the counties that is supplying those contracts. So if you take a look at the contract itself, the solicitation, you'll be able to see which registrations you need.
So where would somebody find those solicitations?
The place to find those solicitations, one place is sam.gov. Sam.gov is a federal website, so you will find all federal contracts listed on sam.gov. Another place that you will find your local contracts will be listed under your state. So your local school districts, your local bus routes, like here, there's Metro,
Right.
and your yes, so your local schools, your even the state, like the state of Texas, because we're in the state of Texas.
Okay. So there's not like one centralized place for like all the contracts and
No, there's not a free centralized place. There are some paid versions like BidNet is one that you can actually go on and find government contracts. Another one is BidSpeed. Some are actually free for veterans. So I
okay.
believe BidSpeed is the one that's free for
Okay.
vets. Mhm.
Okay. So for those of our viewers maybe who don't understand, what's the difference between a federal, state, and a local government contract in terms of complexity and opportunity?
Okay. So when you look at the federal and you look at the state, as you know, the federal is where the money is first, right? And then it's distributed to the states. So the biggest difference between the federal and the state is that the federal government has a larger budget and the state has a smaller one. And then when you now take the cities, they have even smaller. So it's the way the money is distributed. That's the difference.
Okay.
Yes.
And so, it begs the question, um, how profitable could a government contract be for like landscaping, right? Which is it can be on the mowing side, the maintenance side, a very low margin business. And so like when we deal with apartment complexes, typically retirement homes, they come at us at wanting an even lower margin than what we could make maybe in residential, just on the mowing. I'm not talking the landscaping and the upsells and stuff like that. Do you find that government is comparable to like apartment complexes as far as in pricing, or are they more free given? Because I mean, everybody's going to talk about the $800 hammer without understanding how the hammer really happens.
Mhm.
But they believe that government is just throwing money at the wind. So, do you have any insight on that?
Yes, great question. Actually, when you look at the commercial world and you look at the government contract world, like for example, B2C business. So therefore, you're cutting grass at a let's say, for example, at a house or even at an apartment complex, like you say, the margins are lower. With the government contracting, they line everything out and the margins are higher because the government has more money to spend. It's all depends on the areas that that they need. So, for example, you're not just cutting grass with the government. Landscaping is everything with the government. That means
Okay.
you're cutting down trees. That means you're making sure that you plant flower beds. You're keeping up with those flower beds. So there's maintenance. There's a lot more than that. So you can have a $5 million contract just landscaping.
Right.
So it's pretty lucrative.
Okay.
Yes.
So that calls to mind the question for me, and I guess it comes back to the prime, right? So like for example, when I had my landscaping and hardscaping business, tree work was not something I ever wanted to get into. I didn't like it. The work comp insurance was even higher, and I'm deathly afraid of heights. Even though I used to rappel in the army, um, I'm deathly afraid of heights, and I have a rule that I would never ask somebody to do something I wasn't willing to do myself. So I stayed away from it. However, if I wanted to get a government contract and I'm not in tree work, or I wanted to get a government contract and I don't have a pesticide license, can I still get the contract if I'm going to sub out those services, or do I have to have the licensure for those specific things before I can even apply for it?
That's a great question. So it depends on the solicitation. Since you have federal and you have state, usually on the federal side, you can go ahead and you can be the prime without the licenses, and then you can sub out the areas that you do not do. On the
Okay.
state side, it's a little different. It depends on the state. The state will actually provide you with that information on whether or not you're allowed to sub out or you have to hold the license yourself.
Okay. Right.
Yes,
So it goes pretty much by district or state,
correct.
or it maybe even county by county in some states.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Mm.
So that brings us to asking like what are the key eligibility requirements or certifications that are typically needed to secure the government contract. So on the federal level, it sounds like maybe nothing or maybe not that much if you can sub out the stuff that requires it, but I could be wrong.
So certifications, when you look at certifications, there's small business certifications. And if you have certifications, that actually helps you to win the contract.
Okay.
So small business certifications could be WOSB on the federal side, which is woman owned small business, and
Right.
then VOSB, which is veteran owned small business. So these certifications can help you win the contract on the federal side.
Okay.
As far as your license go, usually on the federal side, they don't really require a license and you can sub out those areas you don't have. But now on the state side, there are other certifications, small business certifications that can help you win those contracts. And the workaround to it is sometimes you can actually use your small business certifications, such as WBE, which is Woman Business Enterprise, or MBE, which is Minority Business Enterprise, to gain these contracts. And then you can then sub out the areas that you cannot do. However, there is a clause in there. You must perform a percentage of the contract. In most cases, 51% of the contract usually is what you need to perform, but it varies by state. So sometimes you might see a different percentage.
Right. So, you talked a lot. I mean, we got the veteran-owned business, we have the women-owned business, minority-owned business. So we're kind of going to go back a little bit to the first question. And do you see those benefits changing that, under the current administration? Do you see it change, not carrying the weight that it did, uh, especially say on the minority or the women-owned side with the conversations about DEI that are going on right now?
Well, currently, it depends on the state because right now in the state of Texas, it still holds for now. That could change because of everything that's going on. However, currently there is no change as of right now in the state
Okay.
of Texas. So it varies by state.
Okay.
Now on the federal side, it still stands. So one of the certifications that probably is not going to go anywhere would be your veteran owned or your 8A, something like that, or hub zone. Those are some that would actually be here to stay.
Okay. Okay. Um, so how important is past performance and references when you're competing for the contracts?
Great question. So past performance is everything. um, but
Is that
people,
past, I'm
mhm,
sorry, but is that past performance on a previous government contract, or are they looking at your past performance like, say you were strictly in residential with a small amount of commercial, and will they go back and look and say, well, he's got
mhm.
25 five-star reviews and three fours, looks good, you know?
Exactly. So past performance does not have to be on a government contract unless it's stated in written in the solicitation that it must be from a government contract. Mostly, you do not need government contract past performance. Commercial past performance will do just fine.
Okay.
And then another way to think outside the box is maybe you worked for a company and then that you have done what the scope of that contract is, and you can take that and convert it into your past performance.
Okay.
So there's other ways to look at it when you look at past performance. Also, your employees. Where has your employees worked? What have they done? So
Okay.
looking at past performance is something that you want to do a deep dive and really see and draw it out and make sure that it's what the statement of work is asking for and not something where you go completely left.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, you know, to our viewers that are landscaping companies, what should they evaluate whether or not government contracting is right for their business model or for the size of their business even? Is there a requirement for how big your company has to be before you can even apply for a federal contract?
Okay. So you could just be opening up your business and you're the only one, and you can register your business to do government contracting.
Okay.
And you can use the past performance based upon what you've worked at in the past or where you've worked in the past. So anyone can do government contracting. Now, the thing is with government contracting, as far as what you do, it's up to you. You read the solicitation, you see if this is something that you can abide by. Commercial is a lot more lenient. Government contract is more strict. That means you need to make sure you file your taxes. You need to make sure your things are in order. You're going to go through inspections. All of those things you need to make sure you have aligned. If you are just starting business and you really aren't sure about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and you're not sure how these taxes are or how to do your accounting, I would tell you to wait and try the commercial world first and
Okay.
then go into government contracting because you only get one shot.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So explain that.
So if you're on a contract and you mess up on your contract, meaning you lose your contract, that red flag can really bring your company down. So that past performance is recorded. There's a system called CPARS. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's a system where the government puts in your audit or your rating, how you did on the contract, what did you do, what went well, what went bad, all of that is in there. So it's a report to know, so other contracting officers can know how your company performs. And
Okay.
by going in there and you got kicked off of a contract because, let's say, for example, your employees were drinking on the job. So now you have, it shows that you cannot control your employees, that you hire the incorrect employees. It's a risk to the government, which
Right.
makes it why they kick you off a contract.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
No, that makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
So it generally sounds like the size or scale of your business isn't necessarily a deciding factor as to whether or not you can get the contract. Um, is that a fair assessment?
Yes, that is correct. The
Okay.
size of your business doesn't matter. It matters on what you do.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. And would you say, I think that you've already answered this, but we're going to ask it again, are they typically government contracts are profitable compared to the residential or commercial side, it sounds like, you know.
Yes, they're very profitable, and not just profitability, but also stability. So IDIQs are indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. That's a 5 year contract or 3 year contract. It's basically a multiple year contract. And with
Okay.
these contracts, you now have billing every 30 days to the government. So that provides you with stability.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Cash flow. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can
And usually
definitely.
they pay on time,
Right.
unlike the commercial world, right? You're not
Yeah.
running
Yeah.
down, trying to chase down
Yeah.
your
Yeah. Well,
payment.
yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
usually, my experience has been that if you have some type of government contract, you can take it to the bank. When it comes time to finance, people that's worth its weight in gold.
Mhm.
Provided, like you said, your employees don't drink on the job and you get fired from the contract,
Exactly.
you're good to go. Um,
Yes.
so, I mean, and that's, I was going to ask you next about key benefits, and one of them is, the longevity of a contract and the assuredness that you're going to get paid on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But what other benefits are there from getting a governmental contract?
The experience. So if the more contracts you get, the better your experience level grows. Um, Now you can get sole source, more contracts come to you. So the government will then call you up and be like, hey, I heard you did this. You did a great job. Hey, can you come over and I need this, right? You did great on landscaping here at the VA in Texas. So now the Florida VA is looking for you.
I see.
So that is definitely one of the greatest
So
benefits.
you said sole source. Does that mean that like there's now no bidding process on that if somebody reaches out to you?
Sorry about
That's
that.
okay.
Yes,
You
exactly.
you
That's
shook your head so affirmatively that we
I
just
know, right?
losing shit everywhere.
Tell me about it. Oh, and I'm messing up my hair too. But yes, that's exactly what that means. It means that now you don't have to worry about bidding out or competing with other companies. So anything 250,000 and below can be
Okay.
a sole source.
Oh,
So you definitely want to try to pick up as many sole source contracts as you can.
yeah.
Mhm.
No, that's wonderful. Although I'm not so sure how easy it would be to take your landscaping company and pick it up from Texas and carry it out to Florida. But
Hey,
I
sub
mean,
it out,
yeah,
sub it
yeah,
out.
well, yeah, you can sub it out if you can
Yeah.
maintain that quality. I'm all for that, right?
Yes,
Um,
correct.
so what about any of the pitfalls or risks that a landscaping company should be cautious of if they're entering into the contract? I would say one would be, if you're not able to do it, don't even bid for the contract, right? Because now you get the contract and then you lose it, like you
Mhm.
said, you're out. Your
Exactly.
chance of coming back. But what other pitfalls might there be?
One is it all depends on your subcontractor. Let's say, for example, you decide to subcontract out the cutting down of trees.
Hmm.
So you subcontract that out, and now your subcontractor decides that they're not going to show up.
Right.
That's a big problem, right? So make sure you have a backup. So if you happen to use a sub, don't just go looking for one sub. Make sure you have a backup and be prepared to have
So,
more.
but
Mhm.
I would think, right, since we started out earlier on talking about Army bases, and I know that every base I was ever on was secured. Um, my backup vendor and my backup, for anything, they've got to be on an approved list already, right? So like if tree
Exactly.
guy number one, calls out drunk or whatever, and now I
Mhm.
got to go to number two, I need to already have had him on the list like very early on in the process. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
most definitely. When you submit that proposal with
Right.
that subcontracting plan, that that number two and number three should be on there as your
Okay.
backups. So the government will know who's on their facility. There might need clearance, right? So
Right.
sometimes you have to apply for clearance to get onto a certain base or onto a facility or an area.
So what happens? Let's just say, like you were talking about, some of these contracts can run 3 to 5 years. So let's say I get a 3-year contract and 18 months into it, um, my tree guy and my backup tree guy both, for whatever reason, go out of business. Am I able to amend that, at some point, or am I kind of like up the creek without a paddle now at this point?
Um, so that won't be a good sign. What I would tell you, number one, you definitely want to see about getting an additional subcontractor to fill that gap because the government is entrusting that you get done what you said you're going to get done when you sign that contract.
Yeah.
So it's up to you to find that person. So what you will do then, you will just submit that information to the government, letting them know what happened in writing. And then also, I would do a phone call as well. It's usually you will go through they will assign you a POC, and that's who you will contact as well as the contracting officer, since it will be a change to the contract in that
Okay.
sense. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean that makes sense. And at least there's an amendment process. Yeah, I
Correct.
definitely agree with you that, like, and this should be the same in any type of contract that you're doing, residential, commercial, government. You've got your plan, you've got your backup plan, and then, if you're already starting to move or even think you're going to start moving to the backup plan, it's now time to create backup plan number two and possibly three, on top of that, and be ahead of the game so that you don't find yourself suddenly, without anybody to be able to apply that, uh, do that work, you know.
Correct.
So,
Yes, that is correct.
yeah. Okay. So are there any other challenges that you could think that landscaping companies would face? Um,
Yes, your equipment can go down, right? So
yeah.
you're out there, you're ready. Everybody's ready. All the employees are ready. And then the equipment goes down.
Yep.
So you have to make sure you plan. Planning is vital. Whoever is going to be your site manager or project manager on that site should already have a detailed plan on what happens if your equipment goes down,
Right.
and there should be some kind of replacement, and you only have a certain number of hours to get that done. So usually on a contract, the government will tell you what the working hours are, and they expect you to stay within those working hours.
Okay.
Okay. And make sure you send up a report because they're going to ask for that.
Okay. And then in weather, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that contracts
Weather.
have a weather rider in there, as far as how that, that's that the bane of my existence. I've told this story before, and I think on one of the other webinars. This is going back almost 2 decades ago, but it rained for like 2 months straight, maybe three, every day.
Wow. Wow.
Sometimes like
Yeah.
we'd get out and start mowing it at 7:30 in the morning, and by 9 o'clock we were turning around and coming back home, and we
Wow.
were working 7 days a week just trying to keep up. And I couldn't imagine being under a time constraint for a government contract where, in other words, this needs to be done, and now you're on a rain delay, which means that now whenever the rain clears, you have to do that, but you've
Mhm.
also got to figure out how to keep all your other clients happy, who've also been. Um, so I would presume though, in an instance like that, if you want to keep that governmental contract, they're going to have to be the priority.
Correct. They will have to be the priority. In case of rain, hurricane, because we are in Texas, right?
Right.
Anything like that. What you do is you send an email to the contracting officer as well as the POC to make sure they know what is going on and why can't you perform your work. Usually in the contract itself, that should be in there, giving you leniency
Okay.
during that time. However, once it clears up, they need to priority. So they go to the top of the list.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So, we've talked a little bit. We keep coming back to like military contracts. But there are other federal government landscaping contracts. So let's say, a federal courthouse or a district courthouse, right? Um, and let's say that you've got that contract and you have a military base. The military base, I would imagine all my crew have to have background checks before they can get on there.
Yes, there's going to be a clearance, and it depends on the base and the areas that you're going into.
Right.
They could be additional clearance. So you might
Okay.
have base clearance, but then there's additional clearances that might be required as
Like
well.
a Hawk site, SAMs or something like that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. So the reason I say that though, then we get over to the federal courthouse. Probably not as stringent requirements there since everything's being done outside. I could probably have like two different crews that could service that place depending on who's available on that day within the allotted period of time. It, would I be right there?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay.
And I just seen a landscaping contract for a cemetery as well. So
Oh
it's
yeah,
cleaning up
right.
the
Yep.
cemetery, making
Yep.
sure, and
Yep.
it's the veteran cemetery. Another one is just regular
Yeah.
cemeteries. So
I,
yep,
I, I can tell you we don't like cemeteries. That's a lot of weed
yeah.
eating and edging.
Oh yeah.
Um, so I say the collective we, but I mean me personally, but I know I've had a lot of other guys gripe about it. So the reason though I'm asking that, so my courthouse, right, that I've got, it doesn't matter which crew I send so long as, they adhere to the standards and maybe my point of contact needs to always be the same. But if I'm, say I got a stomach bug going around the company and now my crew that's all been background checked, I can't get them in there because I can't, they're all out sick.
Yeah.
I can't substitute my other crew, right? It,
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in, you know, not know every single problem that can happen, but let's at least look at the realistic, most probable what ifs, right? When you're trying to game out something. And this to me is a very highly probable what could go wrong if I get this contract type thing. So can you help me, and help the viewers maybe understand how to, what would happen in that instance?
Okay, so because you're not performing critical things, like for example, you're not supplying, let's say, a doctor's office with supplies that's very much needed.
Right.
So what you do is you'll send an email, usually, or communicate with the contracting officer and the POC and just let them know what's going on, right?
Okay.
And then you can reschedule it for a different time. So if it's out for a week, that week you just can't do it, then you reschedule it for another week and you can then do it twice in that week.
Okay.
You can do something like
Okay.
that.
Yep,
Mhm.
I got you. Like come
Yeah,
on Monday, come on Friday. Okay.
exactly.
So how about upfront investments or equipment standards that they might apply to landscapers?
Yeah.
You know?
So there's definitely upfront investment. Your equipment, your personnel, you like for example, if you get a 5-year contract, those first 30 to 60 days, you need to have cash on hand which is very important. Making sure that you have all equipment covered, you have all personnel covered, anything that needs to be covered for upfront costs on the contract should be covered. Then you'll start seeing every 30 days it rolling in. But usually when you first start a contract, have that buffer. Mm,
Okay. Okay. Yep,
yes.
that's good. Um, so this next question I got for you. This is like one of my pet projects, right?
Okay.
How important is having robust systems or processes when you're performing government work? I love me a good process.
Wow,
Right?
yes. So it's funny you asked that. So I have a consulting firm. So what I doing right now is we are adding AI throughout our entire process. Having a process is super important,
Hmm.
especially managing it. Putting in bids is time consuming. You need to
Yep.
have a good process, or you're just going to go and you're going to put in all these bids and you're going to win at nothing. So, making sure you do your research, you know what bids you're putting in, making sure your price is competitive, research, all of that needs to go somewhere.
Yep.
I use Monday.com, which is
Okay. Yep.
awesome and
Yep.
amazing. And I have a
Yeah.
link for you if you
Mondays,
need that.
I helped a
Yes.
company implement that for their process writing, and I thought that it was it was a wonderful program. There was definitely a learning curve.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
As it is a little bit of a learning curve in the beginning, but I have to say it's so user friendly.
mhm.
So like we used it. I have four different teams and they use it all across the globe. So
Right.
it's
Yep.
awesome. Yes.
Yeah. No, it is. And so, I just want to say to my viewers, the ones that are live and the ones that'll be watching later, um, that Rachel just said something that I've said as well. Have a process for your bidding, right? It doesn't matter if it's commercial or residential or governmental. Having that process in place makes it so much easier for you just to drop and drag all the important information in there that you need. And then you've got a checklist and you'll know that you've covered everything. And if you've put it into a system, it's going to have your terms uh, right in there so that people just by, activating the estimate, are activating at least on the commercial and residential, not so much with the governmental. They're activating your terms just by simply, saying proceed with the work. So a process for something like that is very, very important, and it saves you time.
It
If
does.
you're getting calls like this time of year, I used to be doing bids from like 8 o'clock in the morning till 5, 6 o'clock at night, and then I'd be at my computer until 10 or 11, putting everything together. I'd have been at my computer far longer if I didn't have a process put together. Because then it just became a lot easier for me to drop and drag. But I could end up doing 10 or 11 estimates in a day in March and April. It was crazy. Um,
Wow.
yeah. Um,
That's a lot.
yeah, it was. I'd really feel drained. But it was
Jeez.
fun, but at the
Okay.
same time draining.
Yeah.
Um, so any specific advice for landscapers that would be submitting their first government bid or proposal?
Um, so what I'd say is when you first start, one, either find a consultant or go to your nearest OSDBU. They're usually at the SBA buildings.
Hmm.
They're free. They help. You need some guidance. That's what I would say. Get someone that will help guide you through the process because the last thing you want to do is spend all that time trying to put together your bid package and you miss one thing. You didn't dot a T. I mean, you
Yep.
didn't dot an I, you didn't cross a T,
Yep.
and then your whole package is thrown away. It's just a complete waste. And then
Yes.
someone
Yeah.
else wins. You didn't even get
Yes.
a chance, even if your price was low.
Yep. The
Yes.
government is very unforgiving on that. I remember I had done some maintenance work on, I was an armorer was one of my last jobs when I was in the Army. And I had done a whole bunch of maintenance work on the rifles and the night vision sights. And I submitted all the paperwork and I didn't do it properly. And the the master sergeant wiped everything off the maintenance list.
Wow. Yeah. Jeez, I know you were pissed.
Oh, I was I'm like, Sergeant, what the hell? I'm like, it took me a day and a half to put this shit together, and then I
Exactly.
had to go back and I had to do it all again. But
Yeah.
but the government is very unforgiving if you don't get things exactly right. Um, so have you, we're going to talk a little bit about, how you can help people in just a moment, but in your experience, because like you'd said, you've been doing this over 20 years, originally on the procurement side for the military, and then on the outside helping people get jobs. Um, what common mistakes have you seen landscapers make in their proposals, or just anybody in that general type field, and how can they avoid them?
Sure. Number one mistake that I see a lot is that they miss a section. So, within the solicitation, the government might ask for past performance of, let's say, trees being cut down. They give all the different past performance they've done, but that part they miss.
Okay,
So not being able to provide the correct bid package to the government is awful. Missing a form, that's another one, or forgetting to sign an area. There sometimes the big packages could be over 200 pages, right? So now you turn around and you miss one form or one signature, and now your entire package is thrown away. So those are some of the common mistakes that I
right,
see.
yeah.
Yes.
So, to the people that are in the this with us now, I just put Rachel's contact information into the chat that you're welcome to collect it. It will be on our free Facebook group later when I post that also for you if you don't want to collect it from here. Um, so yeah, um, yeah, that missing a line, right? That would just be the absolute worst feeling in the world.
Yes, tell me
Um,
about it.
Are there strategies for maintaining profitability in government contracts? I mean, the bidding's going to be important. Is there negotiation?
Yes,
Um,
there is. So after you put in your bid package, and let's say it moves forward, then there is the negotiation stage where the government will then contact you and either see if maybe you can come down a little bit on your price, and you negotiate with the government because they are looking at you and they'd like for you to actually take that contract. That's
okay,
one. Now, a very good strategy is going directly to them, right? So finding the correct agencies that are buying what you sell, put together a stellar PowerPoint, get a meeting, contact them, get in the door, and present to them. That's what I would say to do. Make sure you bring your capability statement, make sure
right,
you bring your business cards and any kind of marketing material to help them. And don't just bring one or two, but bring many, because what happens is one contracting officer might not need you, but now they're going to take it and they're going to hand it to someone else.
right. Yeah, I mean
Mm-hmm.
they all talk, right?
Yes,
They all have
exactly.
lunch together, or they got monthly budget meetings, or
Correct.
whatever,
Exactly.
and they all want to see each other fail. I'm okay. They all want to see each other succeed, right?
Yes.
In a perfect world,
Mm-hmm.
that's what they want. So, I mean,
Definitely.
that brings up the question, is networking and relationship building important? It sounds like, if I were neighbors with somebody that was in procurement for the government, networking with them may very well be beneficial for me. Yeah.
Most definitely. Seeing the POCs for those different departments. Remember, they're the ones that are identifying their need, right? The contracting officer is the one that's putting it through. But these POCs from different departments, they have a need. If you have a landscaping company and you there's the head of, let's say, the courthouse. Hey, they want to make sure that their courthouse continues to be held up, maintained.
Right.
So being able to see those different department heads and handing them over a capability statement, networking, going to those networking events, especially the global networking events, because there you'll actually see a lot more come into one area, like the same conference, for example, SAME, that's a big one. So being able to connect with different government officials is key, and definitely networking with other subcontractors, primes, because their primes are looking for subs all the time. So
Right.
you
That's
don't
that's a
always
good
have
point.
to be a prime.
Yep.
Yes. Mhm.
Yep. So, are there any specific government agencies that you would suggest to a landscaper if they wanted to get into getting federal or state or local government contracts, that maybe they should target first or be looking at first?
Yes. Number one is your local school district.
Yep.
Schools are number one. They're always buying, they're always maintaining the area. They have to, right? They have to keep it up to code. The children can't get hurt,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So you want to think about schools first. Then you could look at hospitals, right? When you look at outside of hospitals, they want to keep their hospitals very neat, very
Yep.
clean. That's another area. Then you have college campuses like TSU, you have U of H. These campuses, they also like to maintain their outside
Right.
tremendously. Now, if you're looking at the federal side, I would say check the DoD. Like stick with the DoD buildings. The DoD has the most money, right? So your profit margins are larger.
So
So yeah.
that causes me to ask another question, right? DOD. Who's going to fund the contract for your National Guard headquarters? Is that going to be the states or is that going to be the federal government?
That's the federal government.
It is the
So
federal.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
so when you look at the National Guard, or the Army or the Navy, that's normally the federal government. The states have other government entities under them, but
Right.
it just depends. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just, because I know the National Guard's kind of that weird hybrid that's both state and federal at the same time. Uh,
Yes,
you
but
know,
it comes from the federal first. So
yeah. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So why don't you tell our viewers if they were looking to get into federal or state or local contracts, how would working with you benefit them? How
Okay.
could you help them?
So one, I help get your registration. Maybe you have no idea when you go into SAMS, there's like a million questions that you don't know how to fill out. So I help you get your registration, help you get your certifications, your small business certifications at both the state and local level. So I'm not geared just to one area of government contracting. And after we then sit down and we strategize and help you gain government contracts. Because the whole entire point of this is to get and win a contract. So that's basically what I did while my last client here, where I'm currently on a contract, I helped them win a $2.8 billion contract. So we're currently on a contract right now for 2.8 billion with the DoD. Their name is Lee Engineering and Construction, and they did amazing and they're super happy. And what we did was we sat down, we did their registrations when they never had a contract before and never had a government contract before. In their first contract, and this is the first contract they ever put in, was $2.8 billion.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
any relation to you?
No relation to
No.
me. No. I know it's Rachel Lee. Lee is my maiden name.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, so what should they do immediately after this webinar if they're serious about pursuing government contracts?
So if you're serious about pursuing government contracts, you can shoot me a text, or you can also shoot me an email about like what your company does, include in there a name, a callback number. So this way we can have our we can go ahead and reach out to you and see where you currently stand, because what we do is we evaluate your business, see where you're at, make sure that you are a good fit for government contracting, that you're ready. And if you're not ready, then we help get you there.
Right.
Yes,
Yep. Yeah, having that end goal in mind is, sometimes the most important step. Well,
exactly.
this has been very illuminating to me. The I I'm always learning more and more about how the government does stuff. So I want to kind of back up for a minute, right? Because earlier in this, I talked about the $800 hammer. Because a lot of people that, they think that the government just spends money willy-nilly, and they hear about, an $800 toilet seat or a hammer, and my brother-in-law, who was in the Navy and retired as a command master chief, had explained this to me one day, that the way that the government procures contracts, um, if they cancel it, right? So let's say they decide that they're going to buy 800 hammers at $1 each, and then they buy one hammer and then go, out of hell with it. We only needed one, and they cancel the contract. The government still ends up paying that $800 to the person, right? So now, yet that hammer literally is an $800 hammer. Uh, so it's not that the government's just willing to spend money willy-nilly, like some people erroneously think. It's that the government says that they need something, and this is possibly a break-in process for them. They say they need something and then cancel it, and end up being on the hook for it because of the way that the law is written. And that's really how that happens. When my brother-in-law explained that to me, it made a lot more sense than, the whole, I could never understand how someone could go and buy an $800 hammer and be that, idiotic, or, not be worried about getting caught for graft,
Mhm.
right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it just never made sense. When my brother-in-law explained it, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And now you explaining, that you don't necessarily need to be as large as I was thinking that you need to be, that you don't have to be able to do every single aspect of that contract, is very illuminating, so long as you can line up. And again, this comes back, viewers, to those relationships that I tell a lot of you to start building. Build a relationship with an irrigation guy, with a hardscaper, with a tree guy, whatever it is you don't do, that's fine. Have that relationship. Now you can use it in a government contract if they'll pass, muster with them. But it also, you can use them in all the other type of works you do, right? And you can upsell all that stuff and you can add on your margins to it. It's a win-win, you know. And so I want to see if anybody has any questions. If they do, just you can unmute your microphone and ask it, and I'll just give a moment for that. Nope. Looks like no questions. That sounds like I asked all the important questions.
That's
This
great.
this is because I planned this, so I this is what happens when you plan. You cover all the questions that everybody
Yeah.
could have had.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, Rachel, thank you very much. Is there anything last you'd like to say before we end this up to the audience?
Yes, most definitely. I know that government contracting, sometimes you can get so frustrated with all the paperwork and that you need to put in. However, hang in there. At the end of the day, once you win your first contract, trust me, it's the best feeling. My first contract on my own was 3.9 million, and I was super excited.
Oh
And
yeah.
remember, when I won my first contract, I was the only person in my business. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so it's not impossible. It might seem like impossible, but it's not. Okay. It might only seem like impossible because you're overwhelmed because you don't understand the process. So we're here for you. There's consultants, good consultants here for you that's been doing it for a while. Don't go to consultants that are 5 years. It
Yep.
takes years to learn how to master this process.
Yep.
So find a good one.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that
Yes.
that's very good.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to wrap this up, and to our viewers on YouTube and all who will be watching this later, Again, my name is Dan Jones with Jones Business Management and Growth Consultants. I thank you for joining us. I thank Rachel Lee for letting us learn from her expertise with government contracts. And if you are looking for a group to give you answers and tips, you can join my free Facebook group. The link is in my bio section. And if you are looking for more information or a little help with your business, you can find a link to schedule a meeting with me. Thank you, and I will see you all next Tuesday. Have a great week. Thanks again, Rachel.